Hello, my name's Maven, and I used to think being ignored was the worst thing a family could do to you. But then, my stepsister broke down my door at midnight, screaming I was nothing but trash. She dislocated my shoulder, broke my jaw. I crawled out, begging my father for help. He didn't even flinch. They didn't just hurt me once. They rewrote who I was, erased me from paper, from family photos, even from the will. But what if I told you? That wasn't the worst part. Would you believe someone could watch their child collapse and still say nothing? Would you believe silence could be more dangerous than fists? Let me show you what happened next. It was 11:58 p.m. when I paused my music and stared at the blinking cursor on my screen. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, frozen not by the cold seeping through the poorly sealed window, but by something far heavier. The essay was about resilience. Fitting. I almost laughed. Outside, Spokane's wind whispered the kind of quiet that doesn't last. I was in my hoodie, curled up on the mattress pushed against the far wall. No bed frame, just the mattress, just the basics, just me. I had been tweaking my scholarship application for hours. The stakes felt higher this time. It was the last chance to get out, to leave the basement, and everything that came with it. I didn't hear her coming. That was the worst part. Vera always made noise before. Heels on the hardwood, the squeak of the bathroom door. This time it was silent until the door exploded inward with a sickening crack. My headphones ripped from my ears. I barely registered her face before the first blow landed. "You little parasite!" she screamed. "You think you're special just 'cause you can write some sad little essay? You're trash. Always been trash." Her fist found my jaw, sharp, fast, unforgiving. The pain bloomed instantly, radiating up my cheek and through my head. I stumbled back, tried to grab the desk, but she was already on me again. Her hand gripped my arm and yanked, hard. Something snapped. My scream tore through the room, but it wasn't just pain. It was years of silence bursting out. She slammed me against the dresser. The edge caught my back, and I collapsed to the floor, gasping. My shoulder burned. I couldn't move it. I tried to crawl toward the door, but the room spun like a ride I never asked to board. "You walk around like you're some little saint, mama's girl, dead woman's charity case," she snarled. "Well, guess what? Daddy's done with your act." My hand scraped across the floor until I reached the hallway threshold. And there he was, Lowell, my father, standing in the kitchen doorway in his slippers, nursing a glass of something amber, his expression unreadable. "Stop it," he said calmly, as if we were bickering over the remote. "You two need to stop." Blood was in my mouth. My vision blurred. She hit me," I whispered. "She dislocated. Dad, please." He didn't move. Just call someone." Still nothing. "You're both exhausting," he muttered, turning his back. "Go lie down." He walked away. I think I broke then, not just my shoulder or my face. Something deeper, something I didn't even know could break. I rolled over, my phone buzzing under me, cracked screen. Voice control still worked, barely. "SOS team, help!" I breathed into the mic. Then everything went black. I came to under fluorescent lights, the kind that hum like bees. My mouth was dry, my shoulder throbbed. The bandages around it were tight. Someone had wiped the blood off my face, but I could still feel the swelling. The nurse adjusted my IV without saying much. Her name tag said Julia. She had kind eyes. I waited until she looked up. "Did anyone—" My voice cracked. "Did anyone come?" She hesitated. "No, sweetie. Just the team who brought you in. They were fast." "Said you hit an alert. Good thing, too." I turned my head slowly. I didn't ask again. The pain from Vera's fists, the bruises, the broken skin, those would heal. What wouldn't heal was the way Lowell, my father, looked at me like a burden he was tired of carrying. A few hours later, a uniformed officer stepped in. She carried a clipboard and wore a look I couldn't read. "Miss Ruelle," she said softly, "we spoke to your father. He's worried. Said you've had some behavioral issues lately. Claimed you threw yourself down the stairs." It took me a second to process what she'd just said. I'm sorry, what? He said this isn't the first time you've had, emotional episodes. I sat up too fast. Pain shot through my back, but I didn't care. He's lying, I said, my voice low and clear. He stood there and watched her beat me. The officer blinked. You're saying, Vera did this. She's not my sister. She's a threat. She jotted something down, nodding slowly. But I saw it in her eyes, the doubt. The file had already been colored in by Lowell's story. They were going to spin this, cover it up, pretend I was just another unstable teenager who couldn't handle pressure. A sensitive girl acting out. As the officer stepped out to make a call, I leaned my head back against the pillow. This wasn't just assault. This was a cover-up. This was what happened when the people who should protect you chose peace over justice. My lips barely moved as I whispered it. This ends now. The screen flickered as I unlocked my phone. The glow cut through the sterile light of the hospital room, casting shadows across the white tile walls. I scrolled past the texts I never answered, photos I almost deleted, until I reached the encrypted folder labeled Archives. My thumb hovered above it. I tapped. Each file had a date, a time, and a name. Some were voice notes, some screenshots, others just single words. Thursday morning, porch light, withdrawal. They were fragments of a life I'd lived on the edge of forgetting, memories I had captured because I knew someday someone would try to erase them. Now I needed them to speak louder than my bruises. It started the night the porch light went out. 1 year earlier, February. Spokane was in one of those odd mid-winter moods where the snow looked like it might melt, but instead just crusted over with ice. I stood outside barefoot, still in my pajamas. A duffel bag slung over my shoulder, stuffed with clothes I barely had time to grab. Vera had accused me of stealing $40 from her purse. I didn't even know you had cash, I told her. Sure you didn't, she spat. It's always something with you. What's next, blaming me for your sad little life? Lowell didn't ask for my side. He didn't raise his voice. He just said, get out. Cool off. Think about what you've done. I thought he was kidding. I laughed. That laugh disappeared when the front door shut behind me and locked with a solid click. A second later, the porch light went dark. I stood there, staring at the door, steam rising from my breath, toes burning against the icy wood. I didn't bang on the door, didn't scream. I just stood still. Because that's how exile works in this house. You're not thrown out violently. You're erased, quietly. I wandered around the side of the house and found a space under the back deck where the snow hadn't settled as thick. I pulled my hoodie tight and curled up on the frozen dirt, using my school folder as a makeshift pillow. Inside it, I had my SAT prep results, 98th percentile. I'd scored higher than anyone in my class. That piece of paper was the only proof I had that I mattered outside that house. My hands stiffened from the cold. My nose bled a little. But I didn't cry. Even at 16, I understood crying was just another thing they'd use against me. By morning, I was numb, in every sense of the word. When the back door creaked open, I heard Vera's laughter echo from inside. She was eating pancakes, maple syrup, eggs. I stepped inside, shivering. I didn't say anything. Lowell looked up from the newspaper. Next time, he said, not even looking at me, don't push your sister. I nodded. My fingers were blue. I held them against the side of the toaster for warmth. That was the moment I stopped believing fairness had a seat at our table. From then on, survival was the only thing worth chasing. 6 months before Vera's assault, another fracture appeared, this time in words, not fists. Lowell called me into the living room. He was sitting in his recliner, whiskey glass resting on his thigh, TV muted. I knew that posture. It meant something bad was about to happen, and he wanted to appear calm delivering it. I talked to your school counselor, he started. Said you've been missing appointments. I didn't miss them, I replied. She wasn't there twice. The system rescheduled me. He held up a hand, silencing me like a server bringing the wrong drink. Don't start with the excuses, Maven. Then he handed me an envelope. I opened it. A printed withdrawal form. my name already filled in. "You're pulling me out of counseling? I should have left you where you were," he said flatly. "This house, it's not your burden to mess with. You stir things up. You exhaust everyone." I felt the world tilt. It wasn't that I needed counseling. It was the message. I didn't deserve support. I wasn't worth saving. I didn't argue. I didn't yell or plead. I just took the paper, folded it once, and walked out. Upstairs in my room, I looked at myself in the mirror. My reflection didn't look angry. It looked empty. "You have no one but yourself," I whispered. "Remember that." Then I reached into the drawer and pulled out the last photo I had of my mother. Her holding me when I was maybe 4, both of us laughing. It was slightly torn at the edge, the ink faded, but it was real. I pried up the loose floorboard under my bed, slipped the photo beneath it, and pressed the wood back down. They wouldn't find her. They'd taken everything else, but not her. "If they won't let me belong," I told the walls, "I'll become someone they'll never forget." Back in the hospital, my body was still healing, but my mind had never felt sharper. Every heartbeat felt like a metronome ticking toward action. I stared at the cracked phone screen. The folder opened wide, every date, every file now more important than ever. I had a record of Vera's manipulation, her whispers outside my door, the sound of her fist hitting wood. I had Lowell's voice, calm as ever, telling me I read too much into things. I even had the voicemail Vera once left when she was drunk, saying, "You'll never win, sweetie. You don't belong here." The nurse returned with new gauze and asked how I was feeling. "Better," I said, and I meant it. When she left, I reached for my laptop in the drawer. It was scuffed, a bit slow, but still mine. I connected my phone, transferred the files, and typed in a new document title. Timeline, Truth. The first entry? February, accused of theft, locked out, porch light turned off. I typed it slowly, carefully, as if carving it into stone. This wasn't just a log, it was my declaration. They could lie to the world, but now, I had evidence. The first line I typed into that new document, Timeline of Proof, looked so small on the screen, just black letters on white, but to me, it was the start of something I could control. Finally. I didn't sleep that night in the hospital. The beeping machines, the scent of antiseptic, the quiet footsteps of nurses, it was all background noise to the storm playing back in my head. Every moment I'd archived, every comment they'd tossed my way like used napkins, every glance that told me I wasn't one of them, I was finally giving it a voice. But before I could begin listing out all the betrayals, I had to start with the one that hurt the most. It happened 3 months before the assault, on a bright Saturday morning in June, my high school graduation. I'd spent the week ironing my gown, double-checking my speech, and hoping for some reason I still can't explain that someone from the house would show up. I guess I thought maybe Lowell would feel something, regret, pride, obligation, anything. I stood at the back of the auditorium, waiting to walk across the stage, clutching my cap so tight my fingers ached. When my name was called, I stepped out onto that stage, and for a few seconds I smiled like any other senior might, until I turned to look out into the crowd. Rows of parents holding balloons, siblings waving phones to take photos, moms crying into napkins, but not a single familiar face in the crowd for me. I checked my phone backstage. 5 times, not a single text, no good luck, no we're proud of you, nothing. After the ceremony, my classmates flooded the lawn outside, surrounded by family. I stood by myself under a tree, clutching the envelope that held my diploma like it was something fragile. I remember thinking, maybe they forgot, or maybe they remembered, and chose silence anyway. I started walking home, the sounds of laughter and celebration fading behind me. My shoes scuffed the sidewalk with every step. As I turned onto our street, I noticed cars parked along the curb, balloons on the mailbox, music from inside the house, a party. Vera's birthday dinner. Through the window, I saw them, all of them, eating, smiling, a cake already half gone, guests raising glasses. Someone toasted, "To the one who always makes us proud." My fingers curled around the metal fence as I listened. Someone else chimed in, Of course we wouldn't miss Vera's big day. I didn't go inside. Instead, I walked down to the park and sat on a swing until the sun dipped behind the trees. My cap still on, my gown stuffed into my backpack. I earned a scholarship. She earned attention. Guess that's what mattered here. A week later, things shifted again. A small local paper ran a feature on students from underprivileged homes who had achieved top academic honors. My name was there. My photo, too, me in that same gown, smiling beneath a caption that read, "From foster care to full ride, Spokane teen breaks odds." In the video interview, I said something simple. I believe kids from broken homes can still build strong futures. It's not about where you come from, it's about who you choose to become. It was meant to inspire, but I should have known how it'd land at home. That evening, I walked into the living room. The TV was on. My interview was playing. Vera sat on the couch, arms crossed, staring at the screen. Lowell stood by the kitchen counter, a drink in hand. "She's always trying to make herself look like the victim," Vera muttered. Lowell didn't look at me. He just sipped his glass and said, "She needs to stay in her place." I didn't say a word. I turned, went upstairs, and closed my door softly. Later that night, Vera barged into my room, pretending to look for her charger. She didn't ask. She just started pulling drawers, rummaging. "Looking for something?" I asked flatly. "Just my charger." "Relax," she smirked, holding eye contact for too long. She moved to leave, then paused at the door. "You're really enjoying your little 15 minutes, huh?" she said. "Keep showing off. Let's see how long it lasts." When the door shut behind her, I knew this wasn't just sibling tension. It was something deeper. Something that didn't come from rivalry, it came from threat. To her, I was a threat. And when someone like Vera feels threatened, she doesn't compete. She destroys. A few days later, I went into the den to look for a printout I'd left near the printer. Lowell wasn't home. I found the document. And something else. An envelope, partially sticking out from the unlocked drawer of his desk. Curiosity pulled harder than fear. I opened it. Inside was a copy of his will, revised and notarized just 3 days after the scholarship article went live. Everything, house, car, savings, was listed to go to Vera. My name wasn't mentioned. Not even once. The part that hit hardest wasn't the money. It was the message. Even after everything, I was still not part of the legacy. I sat in that office chair for almost 10 minutes, the paper trembling in my hands. He waited until I made it. Until I earned something he couldn't ignore. Just to remind me none of it was mine. I didn't cry. I scanned the document, emailed it to myself, and put it back exactly where I found it. Back in the hospital bed now, I scrolled to the PDF and tagged it. Asset deletion. I stared at the ceiling. "They erased my name from paper," I whispered. "Now I'll engrave my truth into stone." I opened a new document. Timeline of proof. The cursor blinked at the top of the page as I stared at the title, Timeline of Proof. My fingers hovered above the keys, but I couldn't start just yet. I needed to remember, to rewind and play back everything that led me here, not just the bruises or the paperwork or the staged family smiles. I needed to go back to the moment they made me feel invisible on purpose. That night, just a few months before the hospital and police reports, I'd been up late talking to Taylor on Zoom. She was the only person I still confided in from school. We were swapping college essays, talking about future dorms and majors, things normal kids should be excited about. But I remember letting something slip, a thought I'd kept bottled up for too long. "Some days," I said, resting my chin on my arm, "I think my dad hates me more than Vera ever could." I didn't mean it for effect. I wasn't fishing for sympathy. I just needed to say it out loud to someone who didn't live in that house. What I didn't know, what I had no reason to suspect, was that Vera had set up a voice-activated recorder in the hallway. She'd been listening, waiting, and the next morning, that single sentence was the only thing playing in our living room. "Dad hates me." Lowell hit pause, His face didn't twitch. He didn't ask for context. He didn't even look up. "That's what you think of me?" he asked, still seated with his morning coffee. "You're telling people I abuse you now?" I tried to explain. "I was talking to Taylor." "Doesn't matter," he snapped. "You're going around saying I hate you. You know what that does to a man's name?" Vera sat at the kitchen island, sipping orange juice like it was a courtroom witness stand. "She's always twisting things," she chimed in. "You can't let that go unaddressed. Maybe it's time we call someone. Maybe she needs real help." I stood there, stunned. "You recorded me?" "Sweetheart, you made it easy," Vera replied with a shrug. "If you've got nothing to hide, why be upset?" Lowell leaned back. "You've got until dinner to decide what you want, Maven. This victim act won't fly here anymore." That was the trial. That was the whole hearing. No defense. No cross-examination. Just me, already guilty. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just listened. Closely. Not to their words, but to how easy it was for them to erase truth and insert narrative. And I filed it away. It was barely a week later when the final push came. I showed up early for my shift at the city library. I'd been working there part-time for months, mostly shelving returns and helping students find reference books. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. A space where I wasn't Vera's half-sister or Lowell's disappointment. I was just Maven, the girl who knew how to find whatever you needed on a shelf faster than Google. But that day, something was off. Linda, the assistant manager, called me into the back office before I even clocked in. Her face was tight, like she was holding in something bitter. "We received an anonymous report," she said. "It claims you've been taking materials home, without logging them, and reselling textbooks online." I blinked. "That's not true." She slid a folder across the desk. Inside were 3 printed screenshots of some third-party reseller site. None of them had my name. None of them were tied to my account. "I didn't do this," I said calmly. Linda nodded, almost robotically. "We're not accusing you per se, but until we complete our internal investigation, we're asking you not to return." I opened my mouth, then closed it again. HR had already emailed a temporary suspension form. My locker had already been emptied. They didn't need proof. They just needed the doubt. And I already knew who planted the seed. Walking home that afternoon, the cold didn't bite quite the same way it had the night Lowell locked me out. But it cut deeper. The streets looked the same. Trees still bare, a few families out on porches pretending spring had arrived early. I passed the billboard with my face on it, the scholarship one. "Meet Maven Ruel, Spokane's own rising star." It used to make me feel proud. That day, it felt like someone else's life, a girl I used to believe in. Back in my room, I didn't take off my coat. I didn't even sit down. I opened my laptop, logged into the encrypted drive, and created a new folder labeled Phase 1. I began typing. Date. Time. Event. Statement. Witnesses. I listed the Zoom call. I documented the day Vera entered my room pretending to look for her charger. I attached a note. No reason to enter. Charger was on her nightstand. I documented the library incident, the anonymous complaint, the manager's wording, everything. They erased my work, I typed, my job, my truth. But I still have control of my words. For the first time, I didn't feel helpless. I felt dangerous. I started printing copies of everything. I bought a second USB drive. I backed up the backups. They wanted me erased. I was going to make myself undeniable. The screen in front of me glowed softly, illuminating the room with a quiet resolve. I stared at the document titled Phase 1, Exposure Plan, and before I could type the first bullet point, my phone buzzed. A reminder. Recognition night, 6:30 p.m. I'd almost forgotten. It was a statewide essay competition. I'd written about injustice through the lens of language, the way silence in families becomes a weapon, how words unspoken can bruise just as deeply as fists. The piece had taken first place. The school was hosting an event to honor the winners. I wasn't going to go, but something in me, the version of myself not yet worn down, decided I should, not for them, not even for the trophy, but to look myself in the mirror and say, You showed up. I wore a simple black dress and a cardigan. Nothing flashy. I walked to the school auditorium alone. The parking lot was full, and parents milled about in groups. I kept my head down and found my seat near the front row of students. For a brief moment, I let myself feel it. Pride. My name was printed in bold on the program, my essay's title beneath it. Someone thought my words mattered. When my name was called, applause followed. Teachers smiled. I rose, walked up the steps to the stage, and reached for the microphone. That's when I saw her. Vera. She was standing just beyond the curtain, wearing a cream blazer, like she'd stepped out of a networking event. Her smile was stretched too wide, the kind people wear when they're about to do something cruel and want to look nice while doing it. She stepped forward quickly, took the mic from the host before he could hand it to me, and leaned in like this was all planned. "What an honor for my little sister," she began, her voice sweet and sour all at once. "She's come so far. I just hope the school doesn't find out about that situation at the library." Gasps rose from the crowd like a wave. I felt my throat close. The air in the auditorium thinned. The host tried to intervene. The principal signaled to security. Vera stepped back, pretending to be surprised by the reaction. "I'm just saying," she added with a shrug. "Integrity matters." She was escorted off stage. She didn't resist, just walked like she owned the place. I didn't speak. I didn't accept the award. I turned and walked off stage, each step heavier than the last. Outside, the sun had just set, and the streetlights were starting to hum. I sat on the curb near the flagpole, my certificate still in hand. A group of students passed by, laughing. One of them glanced at me and said to her friend, "She always makes things about herself." I didn't flinch. There was no shame, not this time. There was something else, something hotter. Rage, controlled, quiet, and absolute. They want to define me in 60 seconds, but I've spent 17 years building who I am. That night, I didn't go home right away. Instead, I walked toward the river. I needed air, water, space, something to hold my anger besides my own skin. As I leaned against the railing near the bridge, a breeze lifted my hair, and I remembered a different summer, the one before junior year. I'd been sent to a wilderness camp funded by a nonprofit, a Survive Together program for teens in unstable homes. That's where I met Jack Hollis, former Marine turned instructor. The man had a presence, not loud, not flashy, just solid, like a tree that wouldn't bend even in the strongest storm. During one of our sessions, he'd said, "No one's coming to save you, but you can train for when you need to save yourself." He taught us how to catalog incidents, how to keep backups, how to build a quiet defense. I remembered thinking it sounded paranoid until I realized how many others in that group lived in shadows like mine. At the end of the program, he handed each of us a paracord bracelet. Mine had 3 small letters carved into the inside plate, SOS. That bracelet had been in the bottom drawer of my nightstand ever since. I had never worn it. Not until now. When I got back home, Vera was in the kitchen, humming. The hum of someone who knew she'd won the latest round. I walked past her without a word, up the stairs, into my room. I opened the drawer and found the bracelet. It fit snug around my wrist, as if it had been waiting. I turned it inward so only I could see the letters. This time, I wasn't going to survive. I was going to win. "You didn't just try to humiliate me in front of strangers, Vera," I whispered as I powered on my laptop. "You declared war." I opened a new file beneath the timeline. Phase 1, Exposure Plan. And I typed, Target 1, School Administration. Target 2, Library HR. Target 3, Local Press. Step 1, Let the truth speak. My thumb hovered over the send button. The email was addressed to the school board, titled, Regarding Academic Integrity and Harassment, Urgent. Attached were 3 files, audio of Vera grabbing the microphone and sabotaging my moment, screenshots of the library complaint with inconsistencies in the sender's information, and a copy of my recognition certificate with the date. I double-checked the text, factual, calm, free of emotion. Then I hit send. It was done, but the adrenaline wore off quickly, leaving a hollowness I hadn't prepared for. I closed the laptop, stood up, and wandered into the hallway. The house was too quiet, which meant everyone was somewhere I didn't care to be. Vera's bedroom door was shut, music low and smug. Lowell was probably in the garage pretending nothing ever needed confronting. In the bathroom, I locked the door and turned on the faucet. Steam began to cloud the mirror as I leaned forward, gripping the sink's edge like it might hold me up. My reflection stared back. Messy hair, faded bruises, eyes that looked older than 17. The drawer beside the sink stuck a little before opening. I reached inside and pulled out a safety razor. My hand trembled, but not from fear. It was something deeper. Exhaustion mixed with a kind of numbness I couldn't name. What if I just disappeared? I said softly to the mirror. Would they even call it a tragedy? Or would it be easier for them? I stood there for a long time, long enough for the mirror to fully fog over, long enough to start believing the question. And then my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. One new email, marked from a defunct address, something with my mother's name. Confused, I opened it. Subject line: "If today is your worst day." Attached was a voice memo. The date showed it was scheduled to send automatically, 1 year after it had been created. I hit play. Her voice came through softly, worn at the edges like a favorite old sweater. "If you're hearing this, I want you to know something," she said. "You're not broken. You're bruised, but bruises fade, baby girl. You'll come through this stronger, even if right now that feels impossible." I sat down on the closed toilet lid, still holding the razor in one hand and the phone in the other. Tears streamed down my face, but they weren't the desperate kind. They were quiet, steady, like something inside had cracked open just enough to let the light in. I placed the razor gently in the trash, not because I was afraid of what I could have done, but because I wasn't going to let them be the reason I gave up. That night, after brushing my teeth and climbing into bed, I couldn't sleep. My eyes wandered to the floorboard beside my bed, the one that creaked if you stepped on it wrong. I sat up, pulled the sheet aside, and pried it open. Beneath it, wrapped in a plastic envelope, was the photo I'd hidden years ago. My mother was holding me at age 4. We were both laughing, genuine, messy joy. Her hair was windblown, and I was mid-laugh with a missing front tooth. "They erased you too," I whispered, running my finger along the edge of the photo. "But I still remember." I took the photo downstairs, scanned it into my laptop, and added it to my exposure plan folder. A new section. Chapter 0. Why I Fight. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. I braided my hair the way Mom used to do when I was little. I didn't put on makeup. I didn't dress to impress, just a clean black hoodie and jeans. Before leaving the room, I printed 3 images. 1. A screenshot of Vera's mic sabotage, captured from the school livestream. 2. A picture of my shoulder the day after she slammed me into the dresser. 3. The photo of my mother and me. I taped them to the back of my closet door, one above the other, a vertical truth I could see every morning. "You hurt me," I whispered, "but I remember who I was before you did." By the time I left for school, the air outside had shifted. Fall had finally made itself known. The sky was gray, but not oppressive. Leaves skittered across the sidewalk like they were in on something I didn't know yet. I walked with my head up, backpack snug, phone fully charged. At the stoplight near the school, a teacher from the English department gave me a nod. I nodded back. There was no speech prepared, no public breakdown waiting to happen, just steady breath and a mind sharper than it had ever been. I didn't sit in my usual seat at the back of homeroom. I took the second row, closer to the whiteboard. When students whispered, I let them, let the stories twist and bend, because soon they'd hear the truth for themselves. At lunch, instead of the cafeteria, I went to the public library 2 blocks away. I sat in the far corner with a sandwich and opened my laptop again. The admin's inbox had received the email. No bounce back, no error. It had been received. With a calm I didn't know I still had, I uploaded copies of my proof to 3 more backup drives, then created anonymous accounts with different usernames. I didn't want to fight fire with fire. I wanted to build a wall so high and so detailed that even if someone tried to lie again, they'd look ridiculous trying. Walking home later, I passed by the park where I used to sit on the swings at night. I glanced at the rusted chains, the worn rubber seats, and felt no pull to stay. Not today, not anymore. That evening, in my room, I watched the files upload to the secure link. I attached them to a second email and this time sent it to the school board directly. Subject: Formal complaint with documentation. Request for disciplinary review. Then I hit send. 2 mornings passed without response. Then on the 3rd day, I saw it, an email reply from the school district office, marked urgent. The subject line: Follow-up, requested, incident involving Vera Isolda. I clicked. They were opening an internal review. A formal hearing had been scheduled. Vera had been contacted for her side, and I would be expected to provide further documentation. I smiled, but not out of joy. It was something quieter, steadier, like the soft creak of a door finally beginning to open. That same afternoon, the whispers started. I walked into school and felt the shift before I heard it. Conversations cut short when I passed. Eyes followed me, but not with the usual pity, more like curiosity, suspicion. A few students stared at their phones, scrolling through something, probably the anonymous posts that had gone up late the night before on a local gossip forum. I hadn't posted them, but someone had. The video of Vera at the mic, the clip from my recognition ceremony, the one where she smiled wide and said, "Hope the school doesn't find out." Now they knew. By lunch, the halls buzzed louder. Isn't that the sister who humiliated the scholarship girl? What was she doing on stage anyway? Man, that was messed up. Vera was called to the main office midway through 2nd period. She looked calm when they summoned her. She always looked calm, at first, but I caught a glimpse of her returning later, cheeks red, jaw tight. Her walk was stiff, calculated. I could tell from the way she clutched her bag tighter than usual that the mask had started to crack. That evening, back home, I uploaded something new, a 5-minute audio file. It had taken me hours to stitch together clearly, making sure each part was uncut, unaltered. Vera's voice screaming at me during the assault. Lowell's silence in the background, his deflecting words, her laughter, my sobs. Attached to that file, I included screenshots of the fake library complaint and emails from the HR department terminating me pending review. I tagged each with dates, timestamps, verification codes. Subject line: Proof of everything. Recipients: the school board, Vera's law office, 2 local news outlets, all from anonymous aliases, all traceable back to me only if I wanted them to be. I sat on the bed and waited. The next morning, a knock came at the front door just after breakfast. I watched from the top of the stairs as Lowell answered. A man in a suit handed him an envelope. "Official summons," he muttered, reading. Lowell called my name. I didn't rush. I took the stairs slowly. When I reached the bottom, he held up the letter. "You've really done it now. You'd drag this family through court?" I met his eyes. "This stopped being a family the night you stood there and watched." He opened his mouth, probably to say something tired like, "You're overreacting," or "You always twist things." But he didn't. He just turned and walked back toward the kitchen. 3 days later, I stood outside the courthouse wearing a plain suit jacket and slacks. My hair was braided back, no makeup, no distractions, just me, unfiltered. Inside, I was led to a side entrance and met with a court-appointed advocate. She was kind, spoke slowly, asked if I needed water. I declined. I just wanted to speak. When my name was called, I walked into the hearing room with my heart steady and my hands cold. Vera sat across the aisle with her attorney. She didn't look at me, neither did Lowell. The judge was a woman, mid-50s, clear voice, no nonsense. She asked if I understood why I was there. I nodded. She asked if I was ready to speak. I said yes. The defense attorney was the first to approach. "Miss Ruelle," he began, "isn't it true that you and your sister have had personal disagreements in the past?" "Yes." "And isn't it also true that you've expressed resentment toward her to peers and friends?" "I've spoken honestly, if that's what you mean." He smirked. "And would you consider yourself someone prone to dramatizing events?" I didn't flinch. "No, but I'm good at remembering details." He opened his mouth again, but I beat him to it. I'd like to play an audio file, I said. The judge nodded. I pressed play on my phone. The room filled with Vera's voice. You're nothing but trash. Then my scream. The sound of a body hitting a dresser. Then silence. My gasping breath. Lowell's voice, low and detached. You two need to stop. Gasps rippled through the room. The judge leaned forward. Miss Isolde, is that your voice on the recording? Vera hesitated. Her lips twitched. Then, almost inaudibly, she said, yes. Court adjourned 15 minutes later. Outside the courthouse, a small crowd had gathered. Local press had shown up after the leaks. Cameras clicked. Microphones were out. Vera tried to slip through, but one reporter caught her elbow. Do you have anything to say about the abuse allegations? She shook her head, pushing past them, red-faced and silent. Lowell approached me as I exited, walking fast to catch up. You've humiliated this family, he hissed. I didn't stop walking. No, I said, loud enough for those nearby to hear. I just made it honest. That evening, I sat on the edge of my bed, watching the local news. The anchor's voice was measured. Breaking tonight, Spokane legal aide Vera Isolde has been suspended pending investigation following leaked recordings of verbal and physical abuse toward her underage stepsister. I muted the screen. The photo they used of Vera was one from her law office website, smiling, perfect posture, soft lighting. It didn't match the woman I knew, but that was the point. Masks never do. I watched her face on the screen for the third time in a row, not the Vera I grew up with, the one who smiled through her teeth and twisted every truth until it suited her. This was a different version, still trying to hold it together, still styled and polished, but I could see the cracks now, so clearly it almost made me dizzy. The headline beneath her photo read, Assistant Legal Aid Suspended Pending Abuse Investigation. My name wasn't mentioned, not yet. But people were connecting the dots. They didn't need to be told anymore. The video had gone viral overnight, her voice echoing in thousands of comment sections, her words now weapons turned against her. You're nothing but trash. There it was, clipped, repeated, subtitled, analyzed. Some commenters defended her, said it sounded like sister drama, but most didn't. Most were angry. Not for me, necessarily, but for what she represented. Privilege, abuse behind closed doors. The kind of person who looked perfect until she opened her mouth. #ProtectMaven was trending in the Northwest. I hadn't posted anything under my real name. I didn't need to. The truth had grown legs and run on its own. Still, I didn't smile. I just breathed, slowly, intentionally, like I'd been holding my lungs hostage for years and was only now letting them go. Across town, in a home that used to hold everything she prided herself on, Vera sat alone in her apartment. I didn't need to see it to know. I'd lived long enough in her orbit to imagine every detail. The firing came swiftly. Her law office couldn't risk association. The engagement fell apart next. Her fiancé sent a single text that reportedly read, I don't know who you are anymore. Friends didn't call. They didn't have to. She heard them through silence, the same way I had for years. I heard a voicemail had made the rounds among her old group. Just 7 words from a former friend. You lied to us all. We're done. When people unravel, they do it in stages. She started with the glass, her favorite red wine glass. I imagined it flying across the kitchen and shattering against the backsplash, the wine soaking into the grout. Red on white, a metaphor so obvious, it was painful. What she hadn't counted on was how fast perfection crumbles when it's built on fear. She tried to get ahead of it. She always did. Tried reaching out to certain people, trying to explain or clarify. But the internet doesn't give second chances easily, and public memory has a way of folding people into categories, victim or aggressor. She picked her role a long time ago. The next day, I was sitting in my math class when I saw Lowell standing at the window outside the hallway. He wasn't supposed to be there. He wasn't listed on my contact sheet anymore. But someone must have let him in. He motioned for me. I hesitated, but followed. In the empty front office, He stood with his hands jammed in his coat pockets. He looked smaller than I remembered, like a man who'd built his life on silence and didn't know how to speak anymore. "You've destroyed your sister's future," he said quietly. I looked him dead in the eyes. "She destroyed mine first. I just refused to stay quiet." He exhaled, shaking his head like I was the disappointment here. "You'll regret this someday." I stepped closer. "I already regretted being silent for 17 years. I'm done." He didn't respond. He didn't look at me again, just turned and left. That evening, I came home and opened the drawer in my desk. The bracelet Jack Hollis gave me still rested where I'd left it. I slipped it on my wrist, not out of nostalgia, but because I needed to remember how I got here. Then I pulled out a box and placed 3 things inside: a printed copy of the court order, the photo of my mother and me, the scholarship certificate with my name bold at the top. I labeled the box with a black marker. Proof I existed even when they tried to erase me. I didn't cry. I didn't need to anymore. I knew what I'd lost. A sister. A father. A version of childhood that never really belonged to me. But in return, I'd found something bigger. My voice. The next morning, the sky was still gray when I walked out of the courthouse alone. The media had moved on. The crowd was gone. Just me on the steps, a little unsteady, but upright, breathing. I took the bus home, listened to the rumble of the engine, watched the buildings blur by. Later that night, while finishing up my English assignment, a message came in on the anonymous inbox I had set up for my documentation project. It was from a user named Littlebird92. It read, "I'm scared. I don't know how to get out." I stared at the words for a moment, my chest tightening, not from fear, but recognition. This girl didn't need me to be perfect. She didn't need me to save her. She just needed to know she wasn't crazy. That someone else had lived through the shadows and found the door out. I typed back one sentence. "I know. Let's start here." The girl never replied with her name, not right away, but that didn't matter. She had already done the hardest part, reaching out, and I knew better than anyone that sometimes one message is all it takes to break the spell of isolation. A year passed after that night in court, a year filled with slow healing, hard decisions, and steady work. I signed papers, I packed what little I had and moved into a small apartment above a thrift store run by an older couple who never asked questions. I waited tables at a diner, took classes part-time, and saved every penny I could spare. And then, with the help of a modest grant and 2 volunteers who believed in the same kind of silence I'd lived through, I opened the front door of a space I never thought I'd own. The sign on the glass read, "The SOS Project." It wasn't fancy. Just 2 rooms in the back of the Spokane Community Center. The first room had a circle of secondhand chairs, mismatched rugs, and a dry erase board covered in scribbled schedules. The second room was my office, or what passed for one. A desk with a chipped corner, a used printer, and a bulletin board full of pinned notes and affirmations left behind by other survivors. The first day we opened, no one came. The second day, 2 students walked in together, eyes down, backpacks clutched like armor. Now, a year later, the place buzzes. There's always someone tidying up, printing flyers, answering the hotline. Our walls are covered in posters. You are believed. Your story matters. Exit is possible. I walk through that front door every morning with a steady breath, because what started as a scream in the dark is now a voice for dozens. Last Friday, I stood in front of an auditorium of high school students. I was invited to speak, not about my trauma, but about resilience. I wore jeans and a gray cardigan, nothing polished, just real. I looked out into the crowd and said, "No one deserves silence. Not you, not the girl in the back, not the boy who never speaks up, and certainly not the child who's told to be quiet for the sake of appearances." I didn't tell them everything. They didn't need to know it all, but I shared enough for them to see I was one of them, that I'd been where they stood. Afterward, hands went up slowly, questions whispered through cupped palms. A few stayed behind to ask if they could help. One girl handed me a folded letter and said, "It's my mom. She doesn't hit me, but she lets him. I hugged her, told her we'd talk more when she was ready. Some wounds leave no scars on the skin, but they echo in voices, in posture, in the way people flinch at praise. A week later, I sat at my desk, sorting paperwork, when someone slid a newspaper clipping under our front door. It was folded, no note. On the cover was a photo of a woman at a gas station just outside Tacoma. Her name tag read, Isla, but I'd know her anywhere. Vera. She was stocking shelves, head down, ponytail loose, no makeup, no performance. Next to her was a young man holding up a phone, watching something on TikTok. The caption beneath the photo read, "Former legal aid tries to start over after public scandal." I didn't feel anger, I didn't feel pity, just quiet. In a voiceover I recorded for the SOS Project's new video series, I said, "I don't wish her pain, I just wish she'd chosen differently." That was closure enough. As for Lowell, he never reached out again, and I didn't either. I had legally dropped the name Thorne 6 months after the trial. Now every time I sign something, it's just Maven Ruel. It feels clean, not new, but reclaimed. He's a chapter I closed without a period. Just a blank space where forgiveness was never earned. One Saturday afternoon, the volunteers and I started a small garden behind the office. We pulled weeds, laid compost, and chose a mix of perennials to plant. One student asked me, "Why lavender and rosemary?" I smiled. Lavender calms, rosemary remembers. We dug carefully, our hands dirty, hearts light. Underneath the biggest rosemary plant, I placed a smooth stone. My mother's initials were carved on it. CR, hand-etched with a penknife Jack had gifted me years ago. Healing doesn't always look like counseling or speeches or writing. Sometimes, it's just planting something new in the same dirt you once withered in. That night, I sat alone in my office, the lights low, the window cracked. The hum of cars from the street below became white noise. I opened a new blog post. Title: "This is not a story about violence. It's a story about refusing to disappear." I wrote slowly, intentionally. I'm not telling you this because I want you to feel sorry for me. I'm telling you this because I want you to see what happens when someone decides their story deserves air. I lost a lot. My home, my sister, my father, and a version of childhood that never belonged to me. But I found something stronger. Breath. Choice. A name no longer whispered in shame. I clicked publish. Seconds later, my inbox pinged. Dozens of new messages from teens across the country. One girl wrote, "I read your story out loud to my sister. She cried." Then she told me about her boyfriend. Another said, "I didn't think anyone would ever believe me. But now, maybe I do." The knock on the door came just before 6 p.m. I stood, walked across the room, and opened it. A teenager stood there, backpack slung over one shoulder, eyes darting nervously. I didn't ask questions. I just smiled gently and said, "You don't have to tell me everything. Just start with your name." Sometimes, the people meant to protect you are the very ones who teach you how to save yourself. This story isn't just about pain, it's about the power of choosing truth over silence, even when it costs everything. Have you ever had to walk away from the people who were supposed to love you? If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real, raw family stories that need to be told.